Steve and Alan's Pro Tips in a short time. Learn a lot.
Hey, Alan.
Hey, Steve.
So, this one isn't going to have as much application for our general music teachers, though I think they might find the music as a language angle to be interesting. I think this one is especially important for anyone who works with woodwind and brass players in a concert band, marching band, jazz band, backup group for a choir, or wind section of an orchestra. They'll all benefit from this.
Okay, I'm going to guess this is going to be about having puppy pads and waste baskets available for students to empty their spit.
No, but that is a good idea. Everyone remember that as well. No, this is actually about articulation.
Okay, so that's probably useful too. What do you got?
In my experience, this is one of the most neglected aspects of teaching woodwind and brass students. And so much of it is because it's often neglected by composers, arrangers, and publishers.
So you're saying those people don't care about articulations?
I don't think it's that. I think it's a long tradition, centuries old, where composers and publishers assumed that players would articulate the so-called right way.
So let's stop there so you can tell us exactly what you mean when you talk about articulations or articulating the right way. I think I know what you mean, but let's make sure the listeners know.
Yeah, it's probably a good idea. So, articulation, that's the general term that basically refers to how the notes are played. Connected, detached, bouncy, accented, legato, staccato, those types of words. And unlike pitches and rhythms, this very important aspect of wind playing is often overlooked, especially in school music programs.
I think I probably know one reason. I remember from my days as a band director that pitches and rhythms fall into the right or wrong category, black or white. They're either correct or they aren't. Whereas articulation, it's a little less clear, right?
Yeah, that's exactly where I'm headed. So let's think about the music as a language concept for a minute. When you wrote the script for the quick pro tip on delegating, which, by the way, listeners, that's become a very popular episode. We encourage you to check it out. Anyway, when you, Alan, wrote that script, you wrote out the words you wanted me to say. But did you write out instructions on how to say those words, when I should pause, what syllables to accent, and so forth?
No, just the words. So was I being lazy?
Not at all. You assumed, and correctly, that I know how Midwestern American English tends to be spoken in the year 2024. So you didn't need to tell me where to pause or how to pronounce the words like a fluent speaker would.
I see where this is going.
Yes. So when we read musical notation, we are usually getting and focusing on those non-negotiables, the pitches and the rhythms. Those are the equivalent of the words that we might read during a speech or play or quick pro tip.
And my assumption when I wrote that quick pro tip is that you are a fluent speaker and you understand how words are supposed to sound.
Yep. And since the invention of and throughout the development of writing symbols to represent musical sounds, the composers or others notating the music made the same assumption you did. The performers making the music already knew how it was supposed to sound, where to accent, when to connect, and so forth. The performers mostly just needed the words or the pitches and rhythms.
So I've heard you talk about this a lot when it comes to swing style in jazz, right? The problem is students don't grow up listening to music in that swing style, so they don't know when to accent or when to connect the notes, right?
Yes, exactly. But I think it's applicable to all genres. So think about it. For the entire history of notated music, a huge percentage of that was written for people who already basically knew what it was supposed to sound like. The most obvious would be professional musicians performing in the 19th century a symphony, or the 1940s big band swing tune, or military bands performing marches. But I think it applies even to many instances of students learning music. In the 1700s and 1800s, if you were lucky enough to be studying music, you probably were already immersed in a culture where you were hearing that music regularly in church, or your parents or older siblings were performing it. Therefore, the notated music didn't need as much in the way of instructions as to which pitches to emphasize, when to connect, and so forth. It was just assumed the players would know.
So what's changed? What's different?
Well, I think it's a few things. In the 1900s, we see these school band and orchestra programs become a part of the curriculum, just like math or science, which is a good thing, right? But the problem is, as the 20th century progressed, there became a wider gulf between what teachers were using for repertoire in their classes and what the students were actually listening to when they weren't in school.
Yeah, so at the beginning of that century, it was kind of like teaching Spanish to students who already knew what Spanish was supposed to sound like because they heard it constantly and they just needed to learn how to read and write the symbols. But at the end of the century, it was like teaching Spanish to students who hadn't heard Spanish before.
Exactly. But so many teachers, composers, publishers, and music education preparation programs did not change their approach. And the end result, in my opinion, is we have teachers who consider articulations to be something we do after we learn the so-called important stuff, the notes and rhythms.
With such a gradual change, I think that seems understandable and not like a lazy omission by music teachers.
Oh, I totally agree. But the end result is we have so many instrumental music classrooms in this country where we are focusing disproportionately on saying the right words in the right order, but not enough regard for how we are saying those words.
So, what other challenges have we got when it comes to articulations in school music programs?
I think this one might surprise people. There are a very small number of composers, arrangers, and publishers who carefully articulate every note. This is a shameless plug for myself. I do this, but most don't. However, they do include some articulations. So you'd think that some articulations would be better than none, and that is probably true. But what I've discovered over the years is that some music teachers kind of assume the implication from the composer is that I've indicated these pitches are to be played short, so I mark them staccato. You better make darn sure you play them short. And these other pitches, they don't have articulation, so I don't really care what you do.
Yeah, I confess I probably fell victim to that now that you bring that up. I'd study my scores for rehearsal, and logically, I'd focus my study on the stuff that's actually in there: pitches, rhythms, dynamics, and articulations, if they were marked. So I should probably have spent more time identifying the unarticulated notes to make a plan.
Yes, and you are in good company. I was the same way. It wasn't until I realized this trick when playing for judges at contests. You see, judges, I think, are basically listening to a performance and asking themselves, does this sound like native speakers of jazz or march or minuet or whatever the genre is? And if it does, the group gets a higher score. And I figured out two things. I needed to make sure I understood appropriate articulations for the style or genre. And two, the students all need to be doing them uniformly. I should probably not say this, but if your group of instrumentalists are playing correct rhythms with stylistically correct and uniform articulation, you can even get away with some wrong notes, bad sounds, and poor intonation.
Maybe this is a time for a callback to your quick pro tip on how to make music sound good. But I digress. It's kind of like the politician who is captivating, not because of the actual words they are saying, but rather how convincingly they are saying them.
Yes, if we must bring in politics, I think that's an apt comparison. We will forgive incorrect noun verb agreement or shallow policy statements if the person spouting them delivers them in a style that we like to hear and find pleasing.
So now what do we do? Not about politics, but about articulations.
Well, I kind of feel like I'm already pushing the quick part of our quick pro tip as it is. So for this week, let's just say simply, know that articulations are a big deal. Please care about them. And in a future quick pro tip, we'll revisit with a second part and dig into the details.
Ooh, come on. Could you give us a teaser about the details?
Okay, let me think of one. Okay, I got one for you. When picking music, we tend to look at the obvious stuff. Can my trumpets play those high notes? Can the flutes play those 16th notes? And so forth. Maybe we also think about tone quality or dynamics. But when picking the music, do we really think, can I help my students sound like native speakers on this repertoire, or is it beyond them? I mean, we've all heard people read words out loud, and we can tell
Mhm.
they don't really know what they are saying or that they don't have a command of it. They're just kind of reciting the words, right?
Okay, yeah. So, like, just because my students can read and recite the words in a Shakespeare play, it doesn't mean they actually understand what they're saying, nor can they convey it convincingly to the audience.
Bingo.
Okay, thanks for the teaser, Steve. We will revisit the topic in more detail later. In the meantime, folks, care about articulations.
Steve and Alan's pro tips in a short time. Learn a lot.